Good afternoon. Tensions are escalating across the region as Israel pushes deeper into Gaza. European nations issue sharp warnings, humanitarian aid trickles in, and violence flares again on the Lebanon-Israel border. Welcome to our special coverage on Qnews, where we tackle the latest developments around the world. Welcome to the program. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared that the military will move to eliminate what he called Hamas's remaining strongholds in Gaza City and central Gaza refugee camps, including al-Mawasi. Speaking in occupied Jerusalem, Netanyahu said Hamas's refusal to disarm has left Israel with no choice but to complete the job and defeat the group after nearly 2 years of war. Netanyahu also laid out 5 principles for ending the war: the disarmament of Hamas, the release of all Israeli detainees, a fully demilitarized Gaza, firm Israeli security control over the territory, and the establishment of a non-Israeli civil administration. The Prime Minister reiterated Israel's intent to maintain a security buffer zone along the Gaza border and confirmed that Gaza would remain under Israeli oversight post-conflict. Britain, Denmark, France, Greece and Slovenia condemned Israel's plan to seize Gaza City, warning it risks violating international law and endangering civilians. They urged Israel to reverse the decision immediately and lift restrictions on aid to prevent further humanitarian disaster. The UK said the military escalation will deepen suffering and displacement without securing hostage releases. France condemned the plan's severe humanitarian impact and called for a permanent ceasefire and open crossings for aid. A new humanitarian convoy from Egypt's Red Crescent crossed into Gaza, bringing essential food, medical supplies and fuel to residents amid worsening conditions caused by months of war. The convoy, part of Zed al-Izah initiative, entered through the Rafah crossing and was inspected by Israeli forces before delivery. Over 2 million Palestinians in Gaza face severe shortages due to Israeli restrictions and prolonged conflict, with the health ministry reporting over 200 deaths from starvation and malnutrition. The entry followed a 10-hour ceasefire announced by Israeli forces to facilitate aid deliveries. Gaza's government media office has reported that only 1,210 aid trucks entered the territory over the past 14 days, just 14% of the 8,400 trucks actually needed. Aid groups say at least 600 trucks are required daily to address the worsening humanitarian crisis caused by Israel's restrictions. Most of the aid trucks, officials claim, faced looting amid what they describe as a deliberate policy to engineer starvation and chaos to weaken Palestinian resilience. Over the 2 weeks, the daily average of aid trucks allowed into Gaza was just 86, far below the minimum needed to meet urgent demands. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz has announced the military will stay deployed in Jenin, Tulkarem and Nur Shams refugee camps in the occupied West Bank at least until the end of this year. The move follows months of intense raids earlier this year, which displaced tens of thousands and caused numerous casualties. Katz described the operations as a security success and confirmed the ongoing military presence by order. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has called on the Israeli government to abolish the Palestinian Authority, describing it as a terror authority. In a post on X, Ben-Gvir urged Prime Minister Netanyahu to take action immediately against what he called Abu Mazen's fantasies of a Palestinian state. Leader of the ultra-nationalist Jewish Power Party, Ben-Gvir, has also previously advocated for the voluntary migration of Gaza's population. On the map, 7 gateways connect Gaza to the outside world. In reality, every one of them is sealed shut by the Israeli occupation army, cutting off the enclave from vital supplies and movement.
On the map, there are 7 gateways linking Gaza to the outside world. In reality, every gateway is sealed, every door is locked, and the culprit is the Israeli occupation army. In northern Gaza lies the Beit Hanun crossing, the only outlet for the Strip's residents to the West Bank. In the east lies the El Shugaiya crossing, closed by Israel about 15 years ago. It used to be designated for fuel entry to Gaza. There is also the El Muntar crossing, used for commercial goods between Gaza and Israel, which the Israeli occupation forces shut down in 2011 and turned into a military site. To the east of Khan Yunis and Deir el-Balah lies the El Qarara crossing, which only opens for the passage of the occupation's military forces. The El Auda crossing is located east of the Palestinian city of Rafah. This is one of the smallest crossings designated for imports and building materials. Karm Abu Salim crossing lies in southern Gaza as the tri-border between Palestine, Israel, and Egypt. It is used for transferring goods and fuel and sometimes serves as an alternative to Rafah crossing. Finally, the Rafah land crossing sits at the southernmost point of Gaza, directly bordering Egypt, and is designated for the movement of people and goods. Before 2005, Gaza was under direct occupation. After Israel's unilateral withdrawal and the signing of the crossings agreement between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, the crossings were opened, and Rafah was reactivated under the supervision of the Palestinian Authority and in the presence of a European Union mission. But about 2 years later, the turning point came when Hamas overthrew the Palestinian Authority. The EU mission withdrew, and PA representatives were expelled from the Palestinian side of the crossing. Despite this, Egypt, guided by its unwavering belief in the Palestinian cause, worked to keep the crossing operational. Then came the events of October 7th and the subsequent Israeli assault on Gaza and its people. The Palestinian side of the crossing was repeatedly bombed. Israel then tightened its grip on the Palestinian side completely, asserting control over all gateways. But Egypt did not stand idle in the face of this aggression. Through multiple channels, Egypt moved with full force to stop the war, deliver aid, and revive the peace process based on the two-state solution. After intensive efforts, hope was restored for the people of Gaza. Hundreds of Egyptian trucks moved from Rafah into Gaza, loaded with food, medicine, and aid. But Israel, the occupying power, stood in the way, obstructing the flow of aid. Settler militias launched attacks on 8 convoys with the support of the occupation army. Then, in May 2024, the occupation authorities themselves directly blocked the entry of aid, halting it entirely until now, repeating the tragedy. Once again, Egypt intensified its efforts, working with all parties to force Israel to allow the entry of aid, ultimately compelling the occupying power to give in to demands to let humanitarian aid into Gaza. Yet while Egypt continues to shoulder the burden, the Brotherhood's propaganda machines spread lies, ignoring those who kill innocents and attacking those who have worked tirelessly for years to resolve the crisis. The undeniable truth is that the crisis is not only about aid and crossings. Despite the starvation of thousands, it is a crisis engulfing the entire Gaza Strip, a relentless attempt to annihilate and displace its people, a plan Egypt has firmly rejected and stood against. The solution lies with the occupying power, Israel, and its backers among the major powers, led by the United States. Amid doubts and international abandonment, Egypt's stance remains a symbol of steadfastness and loyalty to Palestine, stands unshaken by political storms, a promise never forgotten to Palestine and its people.
The story there of the crossings into Gaza and Egypt's attempts to get aid into the Strip. Now, for more analysis, we are joined from Ramallah by Fatah spokesperson Ahmed Fatouh. Thank you very much for joining us here on Qnews. What is your reaction to the Arab League statement rejecting Israel's decision and plan to occupy the Gaza Strip fully?
Well, this is catastrophic. This is going to implement the Israeli plan of fully displacing and forcefully displacing the Palestinian people. Their plan is to move the Palestinian people in masses to the south in their preparation for a mass expulsion and to commit a second Nakba. If we look at this in addition to what's going on in the West Bank with the annexation plans of annexing 60% of the West Bank, adding the statements coming out from the terrorists Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, then we have to see the full picture here that this is an annihilation plan, a liquidation plan to the Palestinian cause as a final solution in terms of the colonial power. So this is not only endangering the Palestinian people as a population residing under this cruelty and brutality of the occupation, it's also endangering the entire region, because the expulsion of the Palestinians and the expulsion of a persecuted population means an endless decades of war and revolution until they gain their freedom. The first Nakba did not end the Palestinian cause, it started the Palestinian cause by starting the longest modern revolution in modern history in liberation movements against the occupation. So this plan is coming out from this extremist ilk of Israel, and the world need to step up and provide the required policies and actions to stop and curb this madness coming out from Israel.
And the UN Security Council emergency session is happening today. I'll let viewers know if anything particular is happening at the UN Security Council. We will go and cross live to it, so viewers won't miss anything. But what would you like to see come out of this Security Council emergency session on the situation in Gaza? And what do you think will come out of it?
What we wish to come out is a binding resolution to stop and end this Israeli war, to bring ceasefire and peace and go forward into the outcomes and follow the terms that came from the two-state solution conference in New York, in order to find a path for peace and go forward into a two-state solution, and to find a permanent solution, peaceful solution for the case of Palestine. What is scary until this moment and what's crippling this UN Security Council is the United States. For the past 24 hours or the 36 hours, the United States was trying hard to not make this meeting or to block this meeting. It took place anyways, and that is a great message, a great global message by the world to Israel and to the United States, that they completely refuse and condemn this Israeli plan to reoccupy Gaza, and as we all know, to go forward into the forceful displacement project. Now, the United States position from pre the meeting gives us this indication that they are going to use veto for any resolution that could come out from this meeting, and that is not promising. We hope that this UNSC could come out with the resolution, but with the veto, that would be very difficult to be implemented. Of course, the UN can do a lot to stop this ceasefire. The UN could impose sanctions on Israel, could impose trade embargo on Israel, could impose travel bans on Israeli leaders, but that require from the UNC to unanimously vote and support without any veto from the United States. So that is the hurdle here, and this is the United States of America. I hope that we could find a breakthrough to at least stop the war temporarily until we could go discuss through negotiations and peaceful means to go for a peaceful resolution.
And of course, I mean, you mentioned there, of course, the United States veto at the UN. Around the world, every weekend now, Saturdays, Sundays, like today, we have demonstrations around the world in European cities across the continent against what Israel is doing in Gaza. Is there anything more? We've had the change of stance by Canada, France, the United Kingdom. Is there more that those countries could be doing to try and put pressure without the United States on Israel?
Of course. Through the UN, as I said, the US is the major bloc. But that does not mean that countries does not have individual or their sovereign right to make sovereign decisions. And here where we ask the world to do that. Canada, United Kingdom, France, and most of Europe have trade deals with Israel, have political agreement with Israel. This can all be stopped and suspended as a way to pressure Israel to stop its war. Now, we have to understand that Israel weapons and Israel money majorly come from the United States and Europe. So they could play the role into applying sanctions in case the UN failed. And that is in favor for peace and in favor for protecting the Palestinian lives who have been dying for the past 22 months. If we have learned anything from the past 22 months, is that pressure alone is not enough to stop Israel. Condemnations and all these solidarity campaigns, of course, it is great. It is important for the Palestinian people, but it's not enough without an actual policies to be translated for actual policies. Demonstrations in the Western world has been, huge and massive for a long time by now, but their governments still are reluctant to take any step further or any policies that could translate this solidarity, this pressure, this popular demand for reckoning, to translate this into an action on the ground and to apply sanctions. And they have the tools and they have all the powers to do so.
And what is your view on the repeated Israeli incursions into the West Bank?
That is in a grand plan of Israel to undermine the Palestinian state. This all comes in a grand plan for the greater Israel. Israel right now is occupying South Lebanon, is occupying South Syria, is occupying 80% of Gaza. Is occupying technically occupying West Bank, except few pockets here and there where the Palestinian Authority still can practice their sovereignty in a very little, very minor. So Israel is actually walking into this grand plan of Greater Israel, a colonial plan, and that is against UN Charter, against international laws and resolutions, and against the interests of the entire region. This expansion of war, expansion of occupation, colonization, is going to explode the entire region into wars and revolutions against the Israeli occupation. Nobody going to accept a second Nakba, and nobody can accept his land to be occupied. Israel is now occupying, as I told you, many places, geographic places from the Arab world. And we are afraid that this immigration plan or this displacement plan under the gun is also going to expand this occupation and this struggle further into the Arab world. So it needs to be faced and to be deterred decisively by the Arab world and by the entire region. The entire region has the obligation to preserve the human rights laws and to preserve the UN resolution. So the United States need to be faced and need to change its policies after 22 months of horror and obliteration of Gaza. Enough is enough.
And coming back to Gaza, are there internal pressures within Israel that could put any pressure on Netanyahu to have a ceasefire or even stop the war completely? Of course, he has the far-right members of his coalition like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. But are there people on the other side that could put pressure on him? And also the public demonstrations that are ongoing in Israel and Tel Aviv as well.
The internal pressure on Israel from the streets, there's many demonstrations against it, and some polls says that about 67% is with ending the war with Gaza. But the problem here is the absence of any pressure on the political level. We are not hearing much pressure from the coalition of Netanyahu. We are not hearing any pressure from self-claimed centrists like Lapid or Gantz, or even from the left. It's very weak, pressure on the Israeli government. So that is what is needed right now, and what is, very critical this time, and they are not doing it correctly. The popular pressure or the people pressure from Israel is not enough. That internal pressure is not enough, and we have seen that practically on the ground. So without a political decisive position to curb Netanyahu, it will not be any fruitful or take any shift on his policies. And to be frank, before that, most of those leaders were in favor of occupying or annexing West Bank. So we can't trust that there's any peace come in Israel, or to be in power or in the size that we imagine. There are very few, and I hope they grow more, but that requires more pressure from the international community, because in such conditions where the government as a whole is extremely shifted to the far right and extremism, then international intervention is a must.
Yes, you mentioned the weakness of the left and even the centre, but we have heard the voices of former prime ministers, former military leaders as well, and it does seem that Netanyahu has no thought of listening to any of them. That would be right.
He's not listening to any of them, and many analysts and experts inside Israel says his coalition is still strong. That the only pressure he receiving is from the far right, who want even further wars and further obliteration of the Palestinian people. Ben-Gvir is calling the Palestinian Authority a terrorist, and the President Mahmoud Abbas as terrorist. He is the biggest terrorist of them all. He is the one who is and arming settler terrorism in the West Bank. President Mahmoud Abbas is calling for peace since 2005. President Mahmoud Abbas adopted the Popular Peaceful Resistance since 2009. On the other hand, they are adopting all kinds of colonialism and apartheid and terrorism. So we have this pressure from these terrorist groups on the Israeli government. On the opposite, it's not the peace camp that is doing the big pressure. It is those terrorists, the extremist far right, who are doing that pressure.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there because we're just out of time. We're going to have to finish up, I'm afraid. Ahmed Fatour, always a pleasure to have you on, joining us from Ramallah, spokesperson for the Fatah movement. Thank you very much indeed. Now let's get the latest developments from Lebanon.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين. وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بيخوف.
Now, the Lebanese army announced the death of 6 of its soldiers due to an explosion that happened while inspecting a weapons depot in the south of the country. In a statement, the Lebanese army said that during the inspection and dismantling of the contents of the weapons storage site in the Tyre region, an explosion happened inside, resulting in a preliminary toll of 6 soldiers killed and others wounded. Lebanese Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri offered his condolences to the Lebanese army and the families of soldiers killed during their national duty in South Lebanon. Berri praised the army as a symbol of national unity and sovereignty, saying it sanctifies national sovereignty through sacrifice. He affirmed support for the military, regardless of the sacrifices, and prayed for the martyrs and swift recovery for the wounded. He also directed Resolute Scouts civil defense units to assist in rescue efforts and evacuate the injured. Now, joining us from Lebanon is the military and strategic expert, Brigadier General Marcel Baluchi. Thank you very much for joining us here on Q News. How do you view some of the reports suggesting possible Israeli involvement in that explosion that killed several Lebanese army soldiers in Tyre?
Good afternoon for all of you and for your audience. Of course, it is inevitable that this explosion is suspicious and Vegas, and of course it's orchestrated. The Israeli enemy, of course, knows about what the indicators is going toward the time frame, and maybe the time frame is made by Hezbollah because it contradicts the seriousness of the state decision of surrendering the weapons and ensuring they will not touch their weapons. The indicators show that it's political targets by Hezbollah, but it's not very far away. That is maybe orchestrated by Israel to expose the situation inside Lebanon. That's what the Lebanese army said in their statement, because they didn't announce the whole truth of the explosion in order to avoid escalating the tension inside Lebanon. Also, because the indicators show that it is Hezbollah behind that explosion politically.
Now, Brigadier General, of course, one of the things that has been announced recently was the fact that the Lebanese government should be the only the only one with arms, and that Hezbollah should relinquish their arms. They are so far refusing to do that. How do you view what is happening right now when it comes to Hezbollah and their weapons?
For sure, it will not be that done that required swift as demanded by the government by the end of the year, because it's more complicated, and Hezbollah still have their own plans. So now, under the with the Iranian foreign minister said that the party will face, and the stances would escalated by Hezbollah, the hostilities by Hezbollah, and also Iran supported Hezbollah and hindering the submission to this decision, and Hezbollah will call the ambassador and send a warning message. Also, it's very complicated, but the roadmap is in place. But I'm worried that there may be a tension happened because of what happened. Also, I'm worried that it will not be implemented as wanted. So, as what happened before. Therefore, Hezbollah, I suspect it would be difficult to come to a peaceful ground, especially that they are still in place of army and of their army. So this is why it's unlikely to completely implement the decision.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to interrupt you there. This was a possibility that this would happen, of course, with it being such a big day in New York. Brigadier General Marcel Baluchi in Lebanon, thank you very much indeed. But we will now go across to the UN Security Council emergency session, meant to be starting yesterday, but was postponed to today and is taking place right now on Gaza. Let's go live.
Israel does not care about what we say, what you say. It is obvious. The only thing that matters now is what we do. What will force Israel to change course is our ability to transform justified condemnation into just actions. And history will judge us all. We appreciate the description of almost all of you of the deepness of the pain and the tragedy that our people is enduring. While this is okay, it is not sufficient. You have to act. You have to do something about it. You have to stop it. Otherwise, this analysis and description does not mean anything if you do not do something to stop it. And you have tools available to you to do so. Mr. President, there is an international plan adopted by the International High-Level Conference in Palestine, co-chaired by Saudi Arabia and France, that starts with ending the use of starvation as a weapon of war and ending the war on Gaza through a ceasefire, the release of the hostages and prisoners, a massive surge of humanitarian aid to the Palestinian people in coordination and leadership, in coordination with and leadership of the United Nations, and in line with humanitarian principles and the full withdrawal of Israel from Gaza. The plan further foresees the Palestinian National Authority resuming its sole governmental and security duties in the Gaza Strip with regional and international support, and Hamas handing over its weapons to the Palestinian National Authority in the context of an end to the war and in line with the objective of an independent Palestinian state. It sets forth an irreversible pathway to an independent and sovereign Palestinian state leading to shared peace and security and regional integration. Many of you referred to the results of that historic international conference about 2 weeks ago here in the General Assembly. If Israel's concerns was actually the end of Hamas rule or Hamas disarming, if its concern was actually security, it would have rallied this plan and should have been happy to see this plan adopted by almost the entire international community. Israel is seeking to cement its full military control over the Gaza Strip and is prolonging this war not to end Hamas rule or to disarm it, but to prevent independent Palestinian statehood. That is the truth. The Israeli government has said that clearly over and over again. Somebody was referring to the statement of Prime Minister Netanyahu. He doesn't want to see a Palestinian governing body overlooking the affairs over Gaza, but somebody else, not Palestinians. He said it. It's not a secret. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. Israel proved long ago it was not concerned by the fate of the hostages. Look at the tens of thousands demonstrating in Tel Aviv and other cities, demanding immediate ceasefire and seriously concerned if this insanity to take place against our people in the Gaza Strip, then this is the execution or the death of the hostages, because that is the position of the families and the tens of thousands who are demonstrating in Tel Aviv. This latest decision is some more blatant demonstration of that. The Israeli government dehumanized and demonized Palestinians to such an extent that its genocide against them through mass killing and starvation, including of children, is not opposed in Israel by some, is only opposed in Israel by some brave voices. Israel proved long ago that its goal is the destruction of the Palestinian people through forced transfer and massacres to facilitate its annexation of our land. If some people believe what Prime Minister Netanyahu said yesterday and today, that there is a huge global lie, that there is no starvation in Gaza, and the two gentlemen from the leadership of the UN is also participating in spreading lies, then why don't you, the Security Council, go to the Security Council, take with you 100 journalists from your countries and other countries to verify exactly what is happening in Gaza. If he's so sure of this global conspiracy about the lie, let him prove it. Invite you, allow you to go to the Gaza Strip and see exactly what is happening there. Take journalists with you so that you can verify exactly what is happening in Gaza. Because I think Mr. Netanyahu is part of all of the effort that he is putting with his government. He doesn't have credibility. He did not convince almost all of you and tens of countries outside this chamber from his narrative, and the narrative of his government, and the narrative of his foreign minister who came trying to manipulate a humanitarian story of a captive and the pain of that caused to that family, and he failed in trying to convince you to forget about the pain of the Palestinian people. Such illegal and immoral plans cannot be met with only outrage. That would not be sufficient. They require the mobilization of all the tools available to stop them, and we really appreciate the massive reaction from almost all countries in all corners of the globe, whether Arab and Muslim countries, or European countries, or countries that are sitting around this table in condemning, as 5 of them stood outside this chamber in a brave way and principled way, not to please anyone, not to reward anyone, but to act on the basis of principles and conviction in condemning this plan by the Israeli government and demanding that they stop this plan, not to allow it to be implemented and to reconsider. Israel proved long ago it does not care about the Charter, international law, or the resolutions of this Council if not accompanied by consequences. These facts have led many to rightly wonder, how on earth is Israel still allowed to sit around this table and in these United Nations? If it was another country, you would have been imposing sanctions long time ago. Mr. President, countries around the world are adopting more and more measures to end any form of complicity and to advance accountability, and we appreciate these efforts. Country like Germany to decide not to send weapons to Israel to kill our people in Gaza, just only to use one example. All states should undertake such steps immediately. Of course, it would be wonderful if you implement your resolutions, and would be excessively wonderful if you adopt additional resolutions with measures. But if these are not possible, act in your national capacity. You have tools available to you. in addition to the tools available to the Security Council, but you have tools available to you in your national capacity. Many of you are using them. I urge others to use them and to ask others to do many other things, including the recognition of the State of Palestine. All states should undertake such steps immediately, but in the face of such contempt and of 2 million lives being destroyed, of people, children, killed, maimed, displaced, starved, humiliated, mutilated, buried alive, burnt alive, abducted, tortured, orphaned, perverted, shattered, torn apart, the measures taken do not match the level of the crimes committed so as to truly deter them. Mr. President, 2 million people continue to endure pain and agony that no human or nation should ever be forced to. They matter. Every single one of them matters, and no one matters more than them. The position of Palestine is unequivocal. We reject all harm to civilians, and our civilians are not less civilians. Their lives are not less worthy. We have never justified and always rejected harming Israeli civilians, killing them or taking them hostage. But we reject any attempt to justify the massacres committed by Israel against Palestinian civilians, or its abduction of thousands of Palestinians, or its starvation policy, or its displacement policy, or its annexation policy. There is no justification whatsoever for such brutality, such impunity. We have called for a ceasefire over and over again. We were clear that Hamas must work with the mediators to remove any obstacle to excuse that would prolong this war. We appreciate the efforts by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States in this regard. We presented plans and proposals and cooperated with every effort to facilitate an agreement to end the war on our people, while reiterating clearly that the absence of such an agreement in no way allows Israel to pursue its war of atrocities against the Palestinian people, including these plans of trying to expel 1 million people from the Gaza City and to have a number of divisions of the Israeli army to control all corners of the Gaza Strip. Neither a ceasefire agreement was reached, nor the massacres stopped. The devastation of our people, the annihilation of life in Gaza continues as we speak. Therefore, given Netanyahu's insistence to pursue this genocide, to destroy our people through death and displacement, to annex our land, to destroy Palestine, and with it, any chance for peace, this Council must act under Chapter 7 to deprive Israel of the means to pursue this war of atrocities. And I appreciate that a number of you refer to that explicitly, and others refer to it by implication. To hold it accountable for its crimes and to send an immediate international protection force to save the Palestinian people from certain death. There is no doubt that it is Israel's impunity that led to Israelis' insanity. And as the world said clearly that nothing that Israel did before the 7th of October could justify harming Israeli civilians on the 7th of October. Nothing that Hamas did on the 7th of October can justify harming Palestinian civilians since. As long as Israel is above the law, it will act as an outlaw state. Mr. President, as they have for over 20 years since the Arab Peace Initiative, the region and Palestine are making the choice of peace. I said it loudly and clearly last few days ago in my statement that Ambassador Samuel referred to. In spite of the pain, in spite of the hardship, in spite of the insanity, in spite of people are not maybe thinking logically, we're not losing our minds or allowing our heart to dictate our decisions. We extend our hand in the direction of peace. We accept the declaration that was adopted by the majority of nations during that historic conference on the two-state solution. And we urge those who have not joined to send their letters to the two co-chairs, Saudi Arabia and France, declaring their commitment and abiding by the declaration of the 19 leaders of this conference, the two co-chairs and the 17 co-chairs of the round tables. Peace is much better for everyone than war. We don't need no more wars. We need to stop the killing, the occupation, devastation, hostages, prisoners. We need to respond to the call of millions of people in all corners of the globe, in all capitals, who are saying, peace now, ceasefire now, release of hostages and prisoners now, stop the starvation, send food and medicine and water up to scale to the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, allow for the reconstruction of Gaza, allow for the implementation of the two-state solution by beginning with ending this illegal occupation, the independence of the state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, and therefore to have the two-state solution as a reality on the ground. This option is much better than the option of what Netanyahu and his government are planning to do against our people in the Gaza Strip, as if what's happening to them is not enough. They want to add more devastation, more agony, more pain. They want to erase them from the face of earth. And we will not allow them to do that, and you should not allow them to do that. We are willing to work with the U.S. administration, Saudi Arabia, and France, and the members of this council and other regional and international partners to bring this war on our people to an end now. To end the bloodshed and the suffering now and once and for all. To achieve freedom and shared peace, security and prosperity. We have a duty to act and cannot waver. Your actions today will determine the fate of millions of people tomorrow, at least those who would have survived by then, and the fate of our region for generations to come. And I thank you very much, Mr. President.
Agradezco. I thank the delegation of the Observer State of Palestine for their statement. I now give the floor to the delegation of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President, and to our briefers here today. Despite some extraordinary and brazen language and statements we heard here, I will, however, attempt to address the supposed reason for the convening of this meeting. On Thursday night, Israel's Security Cabinet approved the Prime Minister's proposal defeat the Iran-backed Hamas terrorist organization. This is the same organization responsible for the October 7th attack, currently holding 50 hostages under unimaginable conditions and remaining the sole source of suffering for the population in Gaza. The IDF is preparing to take control of Gaza City while ensuring humanitarian assistance flows to civilians outside combat zones and away from the reach of Hamas. This is not conquest. Israel has no plans or desire to permanently occupy Gaza. This is liberation from a brutal terror regime. As our briefer stated earlier, I wish to reiterate the principles, the 5 clear principles that the Israeli Security Cabinet adopted for concluding the war. 1, the disarming of Hamas. 2, the return of all our hostages, both living and deceased. 3, the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. 4, Israeli security control in the Gaza Strip. 5, the establishment of a non-Israeli peaceful civil administration governed neither by Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority. This is the only way to ensure a better future for Israelis and Palestinians alike. Prime Minister Netanyahu has made it clear. Israel's goal is not to take over Gaza, but to free Gaza from Hamas and enable a peaceful government to rise in its place. This is the path to stability. This is the path to peace. Hamas's repeated refusal to agree to ceasefire arrangements, together with the horrific images of Eviatar David and Rom Braslavsky, exposing yet another aspect of the organization's monstrosity, make it clear that Hamas will not relinquish its control over Gaza through peaceful means. Nonetheless, despite a broad international consensus that Hamas cannot remain in power, and despite clear evidence of its refusal to give up control, parts of the international community continue to oppose Israel's efforts to act against Hamas. This position is both contradictory and difficult to reconcile with the stated goal of ending Hamas's rule. Some who criticize Israel make sure to call for the unconditional release of the hostages merely to clear their conscience. But how can one ignore the fact that Hamas is exploiting the hostages and the Gazan population to maintain its position, benefiting from attempts to pressure Israel and from the willingness of some countries to recognize a Palestinian state? As Secretary of State Rubio said, talks with Hamas fell apart on the day President Macron made the unilateral decision that he's going to recognize the Palestinian state. Those messages, largely symbolic in their minds, actually have made it harder to get peace and harder to achieve a deal with Hamas. As was mentioned before, Hamas itself has even admitted this. The pressure should not be placed on Israel, who suffered the most horrific attack against the Jewish people since the Holocaust, but on Hamas, in order to demand the immediate and unconditional release of our hostages. Yet, in a complete inversion of morality and logic, this body has urgently convened to chastise the one democracy in the Middle East, the nation standing on the front line of the battle against radical extremist terrorism. If this body truly believes in justice and morality, then let your urgency be directed where it belongs, towards dismantling Hamas, towards freeing our hostages, toward ensuring that such atrocities never happen again. Anything less is not urgency, it is hypocrisy. I thank you, Mr. President.
Agradezco.
I thank the delegation of Israel for their statement. I give the floor to the delegation of Iraq.
سيد الرئيس، أود أن ألقي هذا البيان نيابة عن المجموعة العربية.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a statement on behalf of the Arab group.
لإعراب عن تهنئة.
At the outset, allow me to congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month. We thank you for this opportunity to deliver this statement. We would also like to thank Mr. Yensha and Mr. Rajasingham for their thorough briefings. The Middle East region is at a critical juncture in the context of the terrible and brutal war waged by Israel against the Gaza Strip and the humanitarian tragedy that has resulted from that, and which is worsening the situation for the population of the Gaza Strip, more than 2 million of them, the majority of them women and children. The world is seeing the shocking, striking scenes that are shocking the human conscience, images of civilians that are exhausted by hunger and the blockade, images of those that are being killed as they await a meal to feed their children. Given the serious results of Israeli policy, in the context of those results, the world learned of the dangerous decision taken by the Israeli government to invade the Gaza Strip and to impose full control on it. The Arab group, in the strongest possible terms, condemns the plan adopted by the Israeli cabinet, aiming to consolidate its occupation of the Gaza Strip and to expand its total military control in the Gaza Strip. This is a continuation of flagrant Israeli violations of international law, international humanitarian law, and this clearly undermines the peaceful solution as well as the inalienable right of the Palestinian people to establish an independent state with Jerusalem as capital. The Arab group considers the announcement calling for the imposition of so-called Israeli authority on occupied Jerusalem as a flagrant violation of international law and also a flagrant violation of the relevant resolutions of the Security Council, which affirms that all measures and decisions aiming to legitimize the occupation are null and void, including settlement building activities in the occupied Palestinian territory since 1967. Israel has no sovereignty over the occupied Palestinian territory. This unilateral Israeli action does not bring with it any legal consequences and cannot, in any case, modify the legal status of the occupied Palestinian territory, first and foremost Jerusalem, which remains an integral part of that territory. These measures only exacerbate tensions which are rising in the region, and which, because of Israeli aggression in Gaza and the resulting humanitarian strip in Gaza, are making the situation worse. Mr. President, the Arab group condemns civilians in Gaza being exposed to death, hunger, humiliation. We condemn the repeated use by Israel of starvation as a weapon of war and food as a lever to exert pressure. We condemn in the strongest possible terms the policies of blockade and the forced displacement of innocent civilians, as well as the repeated targeting of civilian facilities, including hospitals, displaced persons camps, and vital infrastructure. That constitutes a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law. We call upon the international community to act immediately to end the aggression and to recognize the catastrophe and the famine in Gaza, and also to break the blockade imposed upon the Gaza Strip. It is also necessary to guarantee the delivery of humanitarian assistance and relief, as well as medical assistance, and the access of international organizations must be guaranteed in Gaza, and their teams must be protected so that they can fully play their role. We also call for support for UNRWA and for international accountability mechanisms vis-à-vis these Israeli crimes to be activated. The Arab group welcomes the engagement by the State of Qatar and the Arab Republic of Egypt to continue their efforts with the United States of America when it comes to mediation in Gaza to reach a comprehensive and immediate agreement on a ceasefire which would end the war and put an end to the humanitarian suffering in the Gaza Strip, while also guaranteeing the protection of civilians, the exchange of detainees and prisoners, paving the way for an end to the crisis and a relaunch of recovery and reconstruction efforts. The Arab group had asked your August Council and reiterates this appeal today under the mandate of the Council in accordance with the Charter, the Council being the organ responsible for the maintenance of international peace and security. We had called upon the Council to adopt a resolution under Chapter 7, which would guarantee that Israel, the occupying power, respected the relevant resolutions of the Council for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, and to ensure that that effective measures were taken to force Israel to end its illegal occupation of the Palestinian territory and to implement the provisions of the advisory opinion of the ICJ dating the 19th of July, 2024. Mr. President, the Arab group categorically rejects attempts to undermine the Ibrahimi Mosque and all holy sites and holy places, both Muslim and Christian, in the occupied Palestinian territory, including the targeting by the occupying forces recently of the Latin Church in Gaza. The Arab group reiterates the need to respect the legal and historic status quo of the Islamic and Christian holy sites in the city of Jerusalem. There is no sovereignty for Israel, the occupying power, over the Palestinian territory and the sites of Palestinian heritage. In that regard as well, the Arab group firmly condemns the incursion by several dozen Israeli settlers led by the Minister of National Security of the occupation government of the terrace of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We also condemn the Israeli occupation plan to transfer the administration authority of the Ibrahimi Mosque and its control from the Ministry of Religious Affairs, the Palestinian Ministry of Religious Affairs, to the Jewish Religious Council in Kiryat Arba. These measures are flagrant violations of international law and international legitimacy. They are a provocation of the sentiments of Muslims around the world. The Arab group warns that the continuation of those violations would expand the circle of violence in the region. The Arab group calls upon the international community to shoulder its moral and legal responsibility to protect Palestinian holy places and to force the Israeli occupying authorities to end their criminal plans aiming at erasing the identity of the Palestinian people. The Arab group reaffirms that the use of force only leads to further destruction and misery. It will not lead to peace. There is no alternative to justice for the Palestinian people and a comprehensive, global, lasting solution to the Palestinian question under international law and resolutions of international law. We also reiterate our commitment to a just and comprehensive peace as a strategic choice to end the occupation and to resolve the Arab-Israeli conflict under international law and the resolutions of international legitimacy, including resolutions 242, 338, 497, 1515, and 2234, but also the Principle of Land for Peace and the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002. The colonial occupation of the Palestinian and Arab occupied lands must be ended, including the occupied Syrian Golan and the occupied Lebanese territories. The independence of a Palestinian state must be enshrined that is fully sovereign with Jerusalem as its capital. The inalienable rights of the Palestinian people must be restored, including the right to self-determination, the right to return, and compensation for Palestinian refugees, the issue of which must be resolved under General Assembly Resolution number 194. In that regard, the International Conference for the Settlement of the Palestinian Question, held last month, co-chaired by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and France, reflects a collective will on the part of the international community to effectively and seriously contribute to the peaceful settlement of the Palestinian question in the form of concrete commitments for a comprehensive, just and lasting settlement of this issue, which establishes peace, security and stability in the region. The Arab Group welcomes the communique of the 21st of July 2025 by a number of countries regarding the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories, which clearly called for an end to the aggression in Gaza, the immediate ending of the policy of genocide, and the systematic starvation, and accountability for perpetrators of crimes against the Palestinian people, as well as sanctions being imposed on the occupying power and its terrorist settlers. We also welcome the announcement by a number of countries of their intention to recognize the brotherly Palestinian state. These are positive measures in line with international law and the relevant resolutions of the Security Council. This constitutes significant support for the legitimate rights of the fraternal Palestinian people to ensure that they can enjoy their right to self-determination and establish their independent state, and also to strengthen the possibilities for a comprehensive and lasting peace in the region. The Arab Group reiterates its call upon all those states that have not yet recognized the State of Palestine to take similar measures that reflect a commitment to international law and to support the historic unchanged rights of the fraternal Palestinian people on their territory. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the delegation of Iraq for their statement. I now give the floor to the delegation of Kuwait.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Gracias, señor presidente. Y permíteme en primer lugar.
Thank you, Mr. President, and allow me to begin by thank you for convening this meeting and congratulate you and your country on assuming the presidency of the Security Council.
سيد الرئيس أتشرف بإلقاء هذا البيان نيابة عن
Mr. President, I'm honored to deliver this statement on behalf of the member states of the Gulf Cooperation Council, the United Arab Emirates, the Kingdom of Bahrain, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the State of Qatar, the Sultanate of Oman, and my own country, the State of Kuwait. We would like to thank Mr. Miroslav Jenča, Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs, and Mr. Ramesh Rajasingham, Head and Representative of the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in Geneva, OCHA, for the valuable briefings. Mr. President, we reaffirm our firm, unchanged principled position in support of the Palestinian cause and our rejection of all forms of occupation and settlement. We express our deep concern and our strong denunciation of the dangerous decision announced by the Israeli government to invade the Gaza Strip and impose full control over it, which is a direct threat to the lives of more than 2 million Palestinians, most of them women and children. And this lays the groundwork for a new stage of genocide and forced displacement, and undermines any chance of achieving a two-state solution. It's also a flagrant violation of international law and the United Nations Charter. Any comprehensive invasion of the Gaza Strip will not just impact the Palestinian people, but will also affect the entire region, leading to an unprecedented spiral of violence and explosion, and Israel will bear full responsibility for it. and the international community will have to answer for silence or failure to prevent it. Mr. President, the international community headed by the Security Council must assume its legal, moral, and historic responsibilities. The scenes of genocide are being repeated before the eyes of the Council without any action being taken. This is a failure of the international community which threatens to undermine the role and credibility of the Council, particularly in this matter. It is a destructive message to the population when international laws are applied selectively. Mr. President, urgent and binding measures must be taken under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter in order to stop this brutal aggression, guarantee international protection for the Palestinian people, and ensure the safe delivery of humanitarian, medical, and relief assistance. And we must also support UNRWA and reject any attempts to undermine its role. In this regard, we value the great efforts undertaken by the State of Qatar and the Arab Republic of Egypt in coordination with the United States of America to achieve a comprehensive and immediate ceasefire to halt the aggression, protect civilians, an agreement that would also ensure the exchange of prisoners and detainees and which would create the ideal conditions for the return of displaced persons to their homes and facilitate the safe and unimpeded entry of humanitarian aid. The Gulf Cooperation Council states support these efforts, and we want to strengthen them through coordination with the relevant regional and international parties in a way that breaks the cycle of violence and revives a serious political process that meets the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people. Mr. President, we all witnessed just a short time ago the convening of the high-level international conference for the peaceful settlement of the Palestinian question and the implementation of the two-state solution, co-chaired by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the French Republic. The conference embodied the will of the international community to relaunch a serious political process towards the establishment of an independent Palestinian state on the borders of the 4th of June 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital. In this regard, we welcome the recognition by a number of friendly states of the State of Palestine. However, Israel, the occupying power, continues its unilateral policies in violation of international law, defying the will of the international community and working against the commitments and efforts that were made during that conference. We condemn the continued Israeli violations in Jerusalem and the West Bank, including colonial settler expansion and the expulsion and displacement of residents and repeated incursions of holy Islamic and Christian places in order to change the historic legal situation. Any attempt to impose a new colonial reality in Gaza or in the West Bank fully undermines the basis for a two-state solution and turns this international commitment into a political mirage. We warn against the continuation of these policies, which will only further worsen the cycle of violence. Mr. President, the GCC reaffirms that the only path to achieving security and peace in the region is to end the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian and Arab territories and to move towards the independence of a fully sovereign state of Palestine, but also to guarantee, in doing that, guaranteeing the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, the right to self-determination, return, and to live in dignity on their land, in accordance with relevant Security Council resolutions, in particular Resolutions 242, 338, 497, 1515 and 2334. And we must also implement the advisory opinion issued by the International Court of Justice of the 19th of July 2024. In conclusion, and from this podium, our message is clear. Israel's impunity is no longer acceptable. And the ongoing aggression against Gaza is a real test of the credibility of the international system and its ability to protect people's peace and international peace and security. I thank you. I thank the delegation of Kuwait for their statement. I now give the floor to the delegation of Senegal. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I take this opportunity to congratulate you and to thank you for allowing my delegation that chairs the Committee on the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People to speak before this Council on a matter that no one can any longer ignore, the human tragedy unfolding before our eyes in Gaza. I also commend the insightful statements of Mr. Miroslav Jenka and Mr. Ramesh Rajasingham. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, we are indignant at this tragedy. More than 60,000 lives shattered, massive destruction, a population starved, dispossessed, trapped under military attacks that are nothing less than collective punishment, cruel and illegal.
And we'll just leave the Senegalese delegate there. Of course, you've been watching the UN emergency session for the Security Council. We heard from the Gulf Group delegate from Kuwait, the Arab Group delegate from Iraq, both of whom, as well as the Palestinian delegate, praised Egypt and Qatar and the United States for their efforts to get a ceasefire. We heard as well from the Israeli delegate, who said that they called for the return of the detainees in the Gaza Strip, said that their detainees are living under unimaginable conditions, is what he said. Some would say that those unimaginable conditions were enforced on all of the people of the Gaza Strip, Palestinians too, by Israel. But I just wanted to go back to Riyad Mansour, the Palestinian delegate, who spoke at length, a very passionate address to the Security Council. He criticized the UN. He said Israel has proved that it does not care about the UN Charter or international law. He asked the question, how is Israel still allowed to sit around the table? And said if it was any other country, they would have been sanctioned by now. As well as praising Egypt and Qatar and the United States for their attempts to get a ceasefire. Riyad Mansour, who you can see on your screens now, also said that if Israel actually wanted to disarm Hamas and end Hamas, they would have welcomed the plan from a few weeks ago, which called for the end of using starvation as a weapon, for a ceasefire, for the full withdrawal of Israel from Gaza, and for Hamas handing weapons in to the Palestinian Authority. But he said, Riyad Mansour, the delegate for Palestine, the truth is what Israel really wants is to end the Palestinian state and to destroy Palestinians. He also said that Israel has demonized the Palestinians so much that the genocide on Gaza is barely opposed by the people of Israel, apart from some brave dissenting protest voices. Well, that was the UN special convened meeting of the Security Council on Palestine and the situation in Gaza. And that brings us to the end of our live coverage for now. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for our main evening bulletin coming up shortly. And if you would like more news, you can go to Qnews EGY, at Qnews EGY, to stay informed. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more here on Qnews. Good night.